And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska aviation weather outlook on this Friday, August 9th, 2024. And this outlook is for the weekend, Saturday and Sunday. The main weather maker will be an area of low pressure riding just north of the Aleutian chain through the lower Bering, and it will come on shore in the vicinity of Kuskokwim Bay and then work its way eastward. There will be a frontal system, some secondary low development that will also help to push wind and moderate to locally heavier rain along areas of the Gulf Coast, especially there just north of Kamishak Bay and along Prince William Sound to near just outside there of Yakutat. So Saturday morning, though, the low is still back out here just north of the Aleutians, and that'll be making a beeline toward the Kuskokwim Bay and the southwest coastline. We're going to see ceilings fall, lower visibility as the rain overspreads the region, along with some fog and gale force winds with the system up into Bristol Bay. We expect rather extensive IFR conditions Saturday morning across the Panhandle, northern Gulf Coast, lower Copper River Basin, as well as especially the south and eastern slopes here of the western part of the Alaska range, because we're going to have that upslope flow with east-southeasterly winds. So come Saturday afternoon, we find MVFR conditions across the Gulf and Panhandle back through Seward Peninsula into the Talkeetna Mountains, but a band of IFR conditions from around Windy Pass down through Lake Clark and Merrill Passes, all the way down along the Alaska Peninsula into the eastern Aleutians, and then covering the eastern southeast quadrant of the Bering Sea from St. Matthew and St. Paul southward. For Sunday morning, as the system overspreads into the mainland and into the Gulf, we find IFR conditions there, western half of the Gulf up and around Prince William Sound, eastern Kenai, along especially the southern slopes here of the Alaska range back into the southwest interior. Rather extensive MVFR conditions on the south side of the central Brooks Range, extending out to Norton Sound, Seward Peninsula. And then on Sunday afternoon, as frontal system works its way east with the band of heavier precipitation, lower ceilings, IFR conditions there across the eastern Gulf up to around Yakutat, back into the lower Copper River Basin. And we also have IFR conditions hugging just along the Arctic coast and then back down through the lower Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait to right along the immediate coastline of the western Seward Peninsula and lower Yukon Delta. So past conditions for Saturday, we are looking at MVFR conditions becoming VFR there in the east central Brooks Range at Anatuvik, as well as Adigan passes. So conditions should be better there later morning, afternoon. Now, as we go down along the west arm of the Alaska Range, Lake Clark, Merrill, IFR conditions, we're going to have rain and breezy conditions overspreading that region with lower ceilings and visibilities. Rain also at Rainy Pass will increase as we go through the day, Saturday afternoon and evening into Sunday. Windy Pass should generally see IFR conditions on Saturday as well. And then Isabel Pass, MVFR becoming VFR. There will be still yet drier air across the eastern portion of the Alaska Range, though winds are going to pick up with this system through the Alaska Range. We expect by Saturday evening into the day Sunday, there is a high wind watch, so that means through the gaps, around the ridges, could be stronger winds along with some moderate to isolated severe turbulence developing there late Saturday into Sunday. Mentasta Pass, MVFR becoming VFR. Tanita Pass there in the Copper River Basin, generally MVFR conditions. Portage Pass, MVFR. And then Chilkoot and White will see IFR conditions early Saturday give way to MVFR conditions. So here are the freezing levels aloft. We have a trough, a cooler pocket of air aloft where freezing levels are below 4,000 feet across the western portion of the Brooks Range, northwest Arctic coast, Seward Peninsula, and even down toward, seeping southeastward toward the western portion of the Alaska Range. So this is a broad trough here. We have freezing levels bump up central Canada, 14,000 feet, even a little pocket there off of Haida Gwaii at 14,000 feet. And we also have, with the system working across the lower Bering and taking aim at the southwest coast, we have ahead of it freezing levels of 12, 14, and even 16,000 feet there from near and south of the central Aleutians. So icing potential with this moist system. It also will have winds, some gale force winds. we find that the greatest threat for moderate icing will be over a large portion of southern and south central mainland, including the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, above 8,000 feet here and through the southwest interior, and above 12,000 feet as you trail out south of Kodiak Island in the Alaska Peninsula. Also, just a general area of isolated moderate turbulence extending further north across western half of the Brooks Range there above 5,000 feet. So here are the winds at 30,000 feet jet stream level. We have the trough clearly demarked here in the upper levels with a 150 knot jet core just along and north of the central eastern Aleutians, pushing up into the Alaska Peninsula. Bring it down to 700 millibars, 9,000 feet, a broad belt of winds southwesterly here across Kodiak Island, the Alaska Peninsula, generally 45 to 65 knots. That spills, or it runs more southerly to 45 knots. That's why we're going to see winds through the gaps there in the Alaska range really picking up too as we go through Saturday afternoon and especially Saturday night and Sunday. That's why there are those high wind watches in effect for Saturday evening into Sunday. And then the backside of it, a broad northerly flow of 35 to near 40 knots out over much of the central Bering. And then at 3,000 feet, we find some of the strongest winds just south of Kodiak Island and east of the Alaska Peninsula here in the North Pacific, approaching the southwestern Gulf, 45 to 55 knot southwest winds. And as we pull back to the north, we find these winds, southeast to south winds up here toward the west arm of the Alaska range, and then wrapping back around the low circulation from around St. Matthew down to just west of the Pribilovs, 35 to 40 knot northerly winds. So that means, translates to the greatest threat of turbulence will be over the southwest mainland, creeping up Cook Inlet, up in the Susitna Valley, and then all along the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, all the way back through at least the eastern and central Aleutians, generally surface to 4,000 feet, though a little higher there around Kodiak Island, the entrance of Cook Inlet, surface to 6,000 feet. There could be considerable moderate turbulence. You'll also see the turbulence increasing as those gap winds pick up Saturday afternoon into Saturday night along the Alaska range.